I'm curious, when you refer to differences on Assad within the ISSG, I presume you're referring to the Saudis, the Turks, and other Gulf states, and their position and the position of, say, Russia and Iran.
Yeah, more broadly speaking, yes. I mean, there are still differences among those nations about Assad's future.
Would you say that the United States position is the same as the Saudi position?
What I won't, I'm not going to be an expert on the Saudis' position. What I can tell you is our position hasn't changed, and we've talked about this.
Right. Your position in terms of the group that met in Riyadh that came up with these unified principles, your position is that that number one principle that they put out is a non-starter, correct?
Well, the Secretary spoke to that was the opposition group's position. It's certainly not the United States position going into this. But again, we recognize there's all manner of opinion here about Assad's future, and that is still work that needs to be hashed out.
But in fact, the administration's position now is much closer to that of the Russian position than it is to the Saudi position. Is that right?
Again, I'm not going to clarify what the Russians' position are. I can just tell you ours, and ours hasn't changed. As far back as a year and a half ago, the Secretary was saying that while Assad has lost legitimacy to govern, the manner in his departure needs to still be worked out.
Well,
The timing of it.
It's also the if of it.
No, there's been no change on the if of it. There's no change on the if of it, Matt. He has lost legitimacy to govern. We need to get to a government away from him, away from Assad, and towards one that's responsive to the Syrian people.
John, just a quick follow-up on this point. I mean, there is no mystery in the Saudi position. Since day one, they wanted to topple Assad. They want him gone. And they poured, last year alone, like $700 million in arms and money and weapons and so on to the opposition.
Yeah.
So they were actually quite, sort of adamant about not even starting the talks with him being around. So are you saying that their position still remains as it was? Or are they getting closer to your position? Or do they accept, let's say, to have Assad in the process until such a time when we have, an agreement on transition? What is their position?
I cannot and will not speak for the Saudi government. Yes, there have been public pronouncements of where they are, and I would point you to what they've said about Assad's future. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to characterize their position one way or another. That's for them to speak to. I can only speak for what we believe in our policy.
But isn't it, I mean, by now, doesn't it seem like foolhardy or ill-advised to keep insisting that Assad must go, rather than, focusing on the primary fight, which is defeating ISIS?
They're tandem concerns. They're related. They're complementary, Saeed. It's from a military perspective, the focus in Syria is obviously on ISIL. The president's made it clear there's not going to be a military solution to the Syrian conflict. Secretary Kerry believes that firmly. But that doesn't mean that you don't pursue a political process to deal with the Assad regime and the political future of Syria. They are complementary. They are related. It will be easier to get a sustainable defeat of ISIL if you have in Syria a government which, by virtue of its own atrocity, is not providing a magnet for terrorists, and a government that is responsive and representative to the Syrian people. That is a healthy antidote to the terrorism of groups like ISIL. Likewise, you're not going to be able to get a sustainable, lasting defeat of ISIL if there isn't a responsive government in place to fill, to fill in the void that ISIL's trying to fill right now through their brutality. So they're related. They're absolutely related efforts, and the Secretary's talked about this dual track, and we have to pursue both. That's why we are very engaged on the coalition side against ISIL, and we're very engaged on the diplomatic front, as we were in New York on Friday through the ISSG. But they are absolutely related efforts.
I just want to understand one thing. Nothing has changed. You still believe that there is a military solution to the ISIS?
Yes, there is a military line of effort.
So when you say the Syrian conflict has to, you're talking about
the civil
Assad.
war. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying.
I'm sorry, my last point.